What would happen if the sun disappeared for 5 seconds? Part 1. The calm before the storm. Have you ever imagined what would happen if the sun, the only star that warms the earth, suddenly disappeared? Not for a day, not for a year, but for just 5 seconds. It doesn't sound like a big deal. Just 5 seconds, what can we do? But in reality, just 5 seconds without the sun is enough to destroy everything we know. 0 to 1 second. No one notices anything. The sun disappears, but you're still standing in the bright light, still seeing the sunlight spread across the street, shining on your hair, shining through the glass. Strange, right? That's because it takes 8 minutes and 20 seconds for sunlight to reach Earth. In other words, even when the sun dies, we continue to see its light, as if everything is still fine. In that moment, the world is still laughing, still breathing, still living in an illusion. From second to third seconds, space begins to crack. No one hears an explosion. There is no collision or loud visual effects like in a science fiction movie. Instead, there's a silent emptiness, something that humans have never felt before. The sun's gravity suddenly disappears. The planets, which were held in orbit by the invisible hand of the sun, are now freed. The Earth begins to drift through space like a child lost from its family. Without the central gravity, the Earth shoots in a straight line at a speed of 107,000 kilometers per hour, like a bullet through the dark universe. Second 4. The heart of the universe is out of rhythm. The moon, which has been faithfully orbiting the Earth, is also affected. It begins to deviate from its orbit, disturbed by the absence of the greatest gravitational force in the solar system. The delicate balance between the three elements, the sun, the earth, and the moon, begins to collapse. The sea, which is influenced by the solar tides, shakes chaotically. The huge amount of water is no longer gently pulled towards the sun, creating unusual fluctuations, even leading to a super tsunami a few days later. Second 5. An unconscious interruption. All astronomical instruments, satellites, telescopes, simultaneously sound the alarm. An unprecedented change has just occurred, but humans still do not feel anything clearly. On the ground, perhaps only a few people look up at the sky, feeling that something is wrong. No one understood that they were standing on the brink of an event that would change the entire history of mankind. And then, after 5 seconds, the sun returned. The light had not changed. The sky was still clear. Children were still laughing in the playground. No one knew that. The universe had just panicked in silence. A blink of the sun was enough to challenge all laws. But what if the sun did not return? What if the 5 seconds were just a prelude to a permanent disappearance? What would really happen when the earth fell into darkness? When the light finally went out after 8 minutes and 20 seconds? Part 2. The last 8 minutes of light. The sun disappeared, but humans still lived in a brilliant illusion, because the light from that explosion, or rather, the lack of it, had not yet reached us. We had exactly 8 minutes and 20 seconds. That's when the last light from the sun is drifting towards Earth. And when it's gone, the world will never be the same again. Minute 1. No one has noticed yet. Everything is still running as usual. Traffic lights are still flashing, planes are still flying, the morning news is still playing on the radio. This is the strangest moment. Death has happened, but we don't feel it yet. It's like being shot, but the pain only comes after a few seconds. Minute 2 to 3. The first signs. Some astronomers are starting to get confused. The sun's signals on the observation devices are no longer stable. Some think it's a software bug. Others are nervous, but silent. No one wants to believe the impossible. On the ground, nothing has changed. People are still going out, filling up their gas tanks, ordering coffee. The sky is still blue, but that peace is no longer real. Minutes 4 to 5. Space begins to tremble. Satellites orbiting Earth are slightly out of alignment. Without the sun's gravity, everything hangs in the air. Space stations sense the first imbalance. The pole is gradually lost, causing them to fall slowly into the cold void. On the ground, some GPS devices begin to give incorrect coordinates. Weather gauges detect a slow fluctuation in atmosphere pressure. Something is changing, and only the most observant begin to panic. Minute 6. There is no time for denial. NASA issues an emergency alert. The Hawaiian Observatory announces the sun is no longer in its place. The world is shocked. Governments meet in panic, but there is nothing left to hide. People, for the first time, feel small. No more talk about money, markets, or elections. The only thing that remains is the survival instinct. Minutes 7 to 8, the last light. And then the light begins. Fades. Not an explosion, not a blackout, but a slow, haunting extinction. The sky turns leaden gray, then deep blue, then pitch black. Objects lose their shadows. Trees stop photosynthesizing. The temperature begins to drop by the minute. 2 degrees, 5 degrees, then 10 degrees Celsius. Everything becomes cold and silent. No more birds, no more wind. Not a ray of light, not a breath of warmth. The planet is suddenly an orphan in the universe. 8 minutes have passed. The truth has been accepted. The sun is not coming back. And we now live in a completely different world. No more light, no more time, only darkness and instinct. The world has not ended, but has just entered an era of unprecedented despair. Part 3. 72 hours after the sun disappeared. A day without the sun. Not rain, not fog, but absolute darkness, spreading from space to every corner of the human mind. It has been 24 hours since the last light went out, and the Earth, no longer a blue planet, began to die slowly, cold, quiet, and hopeless. Hours 1 to 12. Life begins to go silent. When the sun disappeared, the surface temperature of the Earth dropped by 6 degrees Celsius per hour. In the first half of the day, global temperatures dropped to around 0 degrees Celsius. In many places, people have not yet fully realized the consequences. Some still cling to the belief that this is just a temporary cosmic phenomenon. Cities are lit up everywhere, as if they can fight the darkness with a weak artificial light. But no light can replace the sun. And as temperatures continue to drop, the energy system begins to suffer tremendous stress. Solar power plants stop working. The grid begins to overload as billions of people simultaneously turn on their heaters, lights, and seek warmth. Hours 13 to 24. Ecosystems collapse. Plants, which rely on photosynthesis, begin to die. Without trees, oxygen cannot be regenerated. In just a few dozen hours, the oxygen level in the atmosphere begins to fluctuate, causing some of the most sensitive animals to begin dying first. Herbivores have no grass to eat. Carnivores are disoriented by environmental disruption. The food chain is brutally and abruptly severed. The seas gradually became silent. No light penetrated the water. Algae, the first link of marine life, could no longer survive. From here, the ocean began to rot from the inside out. Day 2, humans reached their limit. In equatorial regions, temperatures dropped to minus 17 degrees Celsius. In temperate regions, everything froze. The most densely populated places like New York, London, Tokyo began to become frozen graveyards. People rushed to find shelter. Subways, basements, mines, anywhere that could retain a little warmth. Some governments moved people underground, using nuclear reactors to provide temporary heating. But not everyone was chosen. Life became a privilege. As power supplies dwindled, shelters began to be abandoned. The survivors began to grab gas cans, batteries, and sips of warm water. The world no longer divided by nationality, religion, or skin color. It divided people into 2 categories, those who were colder and those who were cold to death. Day 3. Everything is frozen. Temperatures now drop to minus 40 degrees Celsius to minus 60 degrees Celsius in many places. The oceans began to freeze on their surfaces. The seemingly endless seas were now sheets of gray ice, cracking under the cold moonlight. People were no longer living, they were just existing. The body could no longer withstand the cold. The blood began to congeal in the extremities, the brain slowed down, and then shut down. The cities fell into an eternal sleep. No smoke, no sirens, nothing but the silence of death. A glimmer of hope? Or the final chapter. While everything was frozen, a small group of scientists who survived in underground shelters began to find a way to simulate sunlight using fusion energy technology. They could extend life by a few months or a few years. But it was an unequal battle. Without the sun, all life models failed. Life could be extended, but it could not return. And if you were wondering, how long could we live if the sun disappeared forever? The answer is less than a week for most creatures, a few months for the luckiest, and a few years for dreams that have not yet ended. The sun is not just light. It is the source of everything. And sometimes just 5 seconds of disappearance is enough to remind humanity that we are nothing without it.